Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me for our writing lesson today. You can see on the screen that we're going to talk today about leads. So this is the very first thing that is part of your realistic fiction story. It's the first thing that your reader is going to read. And we want to hook them. Remember, we've talked about that in the past. So let's talk about what kind of leads we're going to use for our realistic fiction stories today. Okay. First of all, why do writers want a good lead? Well, we've talked about it a lot, but the purpose is to get your reader invested, right, and interested in your story. Think about the books that you read. If you read the beginning of it and you're not very interested, you're going to abandon that book, right? Maybe it might be too hard. That might be one reason. But quite often, it's it just doesn't really grab me. It doesn't do much for me. I'm not very interested, and you're not going to continue to read. So as a published author, you want people to read and buy your books, right? This is your chance when you write that lead to hook your reader, right? You can introduce the main characters and the setting and the story. And then once they're hooked, they're going to continue to read your story. And that's what every author, every published author especially, wants. They want somebody who's going to continue to read their books and then share their love of that author and can continue to write like that as well. Okay. So today we're going to talk about 3 different types of leads that you're going to start your realistic fiction story with. You're going to pick one of these and you're going to get started on that today. All right. So here are some examples. And this is how you're going to do it. Okay. One lead that you can use is describing your setting. So thinking about the location and where your story takes place. So here's an example. This is a lead that describes the setting. It says Comerica Park, home of the Detroit Tigers, was bustling with baseball fans eager to cheer on their team. So that's the first thing that your reader is going to read, and it kind of hooks them. Ooh, I know this is going to be about baseball. We're talking about the place, which is Comerica Park. It's probably spring or summer, right, with baseball season. And it goes on to describe the setting. Now, that's just one sentence to get started. You might choose to do dialogue. Dialogue is conversation. So here's how this one starts out. Popcorn, get your popcorn. That familiar phrase reminded Joey that it was game day, right? You hear somebody talking or you have a conversation with somebody, you can start your realistic fiction with dialogue. Okay, remember those talking marks we put around the quotation marks around when people are talking. The other kind of lead you can choose for this story today is an action lead. So you're showing some action. So, for example, Joey bounced into Comerica Park as he punched his fist into his new leather glove over and over and over. Can you picture that happening in your mind? You have to visualize something like that. Okay, so maybe you're going to show action, right? Your character doing something. And you'll notice I talked about a character and I talked about the setting at the same time. Okay, now all good writers stretch things out, right? So this is just the very beginning, just the first sentence in your realistic fiction top triangle, right? Let me show you my example. You remember last week when I showed you I had introduced the characters in the setting and I said, we're going to wait for the lead until next week. Remember, Tilly was eating lunch with her friends. That was kind of who was in it and where they were talking about being at school. So I went back and I wrote my lead today. Now, I didn't change any of this information, right? I'll do that when I'm going to start writing my story. But my lead, think about, am I doing the setting? Am I showing dialogue? Or am I showing you some action? Okay. Rushing to the long, skinny lunch table, I could smell fresh hot dogs looming in the air. Plopped down my pink polka-dotted lunch bag as Sarah and Claire sat down beside me. Okay, so I'm showing some action, right? Rushing to the long, skinny lunch table, right? Who was my character? Tilly, right? And I'm going to take the I out and put Tilly in there, okay? Because that would be first person, and I think I want it to be a narrator showing us. So I'm going to take the I out of there, and I'm going to put Tilly could smell fresh hot dogs looming in the air. Not I, but she plopped down her Do you see how I'm going back and I'm changing information? She plopped down her pink polka dotted lunch bag as Sarah and Claire sat down beside her, right like that. Okay, so you can see that my lead is showing you action. We can picture in our mind, visualize what she's doing and what's happening, right? We could smell the hot dogs, so I added a little bit of my senses in there, right? And I gave a description of her lunch bag. So starting my story, I'm showing you some action, okay? And I'm kind of setting the scene. So you're going to do the same thing today. The next slide says exactly that, right? That you're going to get your turn. So on the next slide after this one is another example, just like what you had before, that shows, right? That hook shows your top triangle for your top paragraph, right? Your first paragraph. This is your introduction. So you're going to get to write your lead in here. And then you can also show us a little bit more about introducing your characters and your setting. You should have done this the other day. So maybe you can remember, you can go back and you can add that back in. This is the first paragraph that your reader is going to read. This is just getting your ideas down, right? Your lead needs to be written. What's the first sentence? Okay. It's either action, it's either dialogue, or it's showing and describing the setting. Okay. So this is going to start your story. The rest of it is just going to be your planning, because when you start your draft, right, your actual writing of your paragraphs, that's where you'll give lots of detail. All right. So today, your job is to go back and pick one of these types of leads to start your realistic fiction story. I give you some examples here. You might want to go and look in some of your books and see if they give a good example that shows the setting or dialogue or action. And you can model your lead after that as well. All right, can't wait to read them.